In Matthew chapter 2, talking about the wise men coming to see Jesus, and they're protesting that too. Did y'all see that? Where folks are having nativity scenes, how the wise men. I don't know what the gripe is about the wise men, but I saw it today. Said that they was protesting. Folks, might be because he's calling them wise. I don't know. But it said, now when Jesus was born in Jerusalem in Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east of Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. Now, these folks from over in Babylon didn't just get up one morning and say, let's look and see if we can find a star. They had the prophecies, folks, of Christ, and they were looking because they knew the timing. See, in Numbers 24 and 17, there was a backslid prophet named Balaam that said a star would rise out of Israel, out of Jacob, which was Israel, and he would rule. So, and then Daniel, in the first chapter of Daniel, verse 25, gave the timing of it. So when they read the prophecies and they saw, hey, we are in that timing, they were looking for something to happen. And the thing, that strikes me is how few people knew that it was the time and was looking for him. They taught the prophets every Sabbath day in the synagogues and in the temple. The prophets were taught. These people had every right to, every reason to have known the time that they was in, but only a handful knew. And the folks that did know was from out of Babylon, heathens. They didn't even worship God, but they had a prophet named Daniel there. And they had Daniel's work, and Daniel had laid it out. And like I said, I know he was telling them about God. But the prophets had laid out the birth of Christ. And we know it wasn't December the 25th. It was more than likely it was in the month of Tishri, which is September, October. Because now they had issued a tax decree, and these people are, they raise animals and they grow crops, and so around September, October, to when they're getting their money is when they would levy these taxes where folks could come pay. At that time, and the shepherds were still out there. They come in the wintertime. So, but December the 25th was chosen by when the Catholics took over the church, because so many of the people at that time had been in the pagan religion, and December the 25th was Zeus's birthday. Constantine, according to what I've read, he took his whole army down to once he said that he had been converted to Christianity, he took his army down to the river and baptized his whole army and said, now you're a Christian. They had no idea what that was, but he baptized them and told them they was, so they was. And then he tried to fit everything into what they were already doing. So December the 25th became the day that was celebrated as Christ's birth, but more than likely it was not December the 25th. But the truth is, he was born. That's what we have to hang on. He was born. He came. But very few people, not only did they not know the timing, once he was here, paid no attention to it. And it's about the same way it is today, because look, we've always got this thing, folks. Okay, it's going to happen one day, but not this day. Not here and not now. And the prophecies had slipped up on the Jewish people, even though they knew they'd been taught, and even though from years they were praying for Messiah, looking for Messiah, but they wasn't looking for him to come as a baby. And again, their prophet Micah told exactly where he was coming from, out of Bethlehem. Isaiah told he'd be born of a virgin, but they were looking for a Messiah that would come and overthrow the Roman rule and give Israel back its sovereignty. They weren't looking for a baby, wasn't wanting a baby born to die. They was wanting a king born to bring them back into prominence. And so Jesus was not what they was looking for. And today, folks, the reason that we've got so much junk going on in the what we call the Christian religion is because Jesus or the Bible is not what a lot of folks are looking for. They're just not. And they twist and turn his doctrine into something that will fit them. And so today, people, if you look at the Bible, there is as many or more prophecies concerning the coming of Christ this time than there were that time. Few people knew it then, few people are expecting it now. We know one scripture, no man knows the day or the hour. Jesus said that. No man knoweth the day or the hour, and no man still don't know the day or the hour. But when he said that, it was 2,000 years ago, folks. That's a 24-hour period. And he's not talking about the coming to reign. He was talking about the rapture. Because the Feast of Trumpets, they still say that today. No man knows the day or the hour when the Feast of Trumpets starts. Because until the priest sees the first new moon, it don't start. It starts when they see the first new moon, and then they blow the trumpets, and the Feast of Trumpets starts. And that's signifying the coming rapture. And folks, it will come sometimes in September, October, in that period. But we talk about the coming of the Lord, but actually, most of the time when you hear folks talk about the coming of the Lord, they're talking about the rapture of the church, not the coming to reign. Because the coming to reign is not going to happen till after the Great Tribulation. And see, unless you get that separated, you'll read and you'll begin to think that the church is going through the tribulation, because the coming to reign is after the tribulation. But the church comes back with Christ to rule and reign. They're not here during the Great Tribulation. Now, there's some bad times coming right now. A lot of folks say, I believe we're in the Great Tribulation now. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're in a bad time, but we're not in the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation is the wrath of harvest poured out upon a disobedient people. And folks, if you're born again, God ain't mad at you. He ain't even mad at the sinner. He's wanting the sinner to come to him. So, but why in the world would he want the bride of Christ to be beat up by the Antichrist? What would that prove? Hey, a third of men dying. Hey, we're fixing to see some stuff. I can tell you that right now. But no, you ain't going to see the Great Tribulation if you're born again. Because that starts when the church leaves. In Revelation 4:4, you don't see the church, I believe it's 4:4, you don't see a church on earth again after that. And the seals of judgment are not started opening until Revelation 6. So the church is going out and tribulation fall. Paul even wrote, talking about the Antichrist coming, he said, he that letteth or hindereth will hinder until he's taken out of the way. Talking about the Holy Spirit. It's taken out, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit will be taken out with the church. And then there'll be no restraining power left. And folks that's been praying for this coming Antichrist, and people don't realize they're praying for Antichrist, but there's a lot of folks praying for somebody to come along and to save them out of this mess. And they're looking for a man because they've already rejected Jesus, folks. That's what we was reading in the news right there a while ago. The world don't want Jesus. They really don't. Anything that referring to Christ now, the world people is throwing that out. They've already decided Christ is not for them. But hey, if a man comes along, Jesus said if somebody come in his own name, that they would accept him. If a man comes along and says, I got the answer, they'll line up. But we're coming into that time of the coming of the Lord. And again, most folks are missing it because most folks don't see when we see what the Word says, it's kind of like, okay, sometime, but not now. It's not in my time. But see, Paul talking about the rapture over in Corinthians, he said it would happen in a moment, in a twinkle of an eye. But John the Revelator in Revelation 6:15 talks about a people running to the mountains when they see Christ coming to reign, trying and saying, hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne. So when he comes to reign, it's not going to be a quick thing. I don't know how long it's going to take for him to get here, but hey, it takes a pretty good while for the world's population to try to be running and finding a place to hide and to gather their armies together in a place called Armageddon to try to stop the coming Christ. And you got to know this, folks. for people to have sunk low enough to feel like they can stop Christ from coming, hey, they've got to have their mind blocked from Christ for a while now.
That's right.
Saying, hey, this ain't, he's not really real. It's not really going to happen. To think that they're going to stop him from returning. But that's what happens in Armageddon. The armies of the world gather into that place called Midigo to stop the returning Christ. The man that's got your breath in his hand, there ain't much you're going to do to fight against him. But to get to that point of ignorance, man has got to have had their mind totally blinded, and that's what we're seeing now. But the coming to reign will happen after the 7 years of the Great Tribulation. So when we talk about the coming of Christ, we're talking about the rapture. And he's not actually coming on earth in the rapture. He calls the church where he's at. But, we see in the prophecies where the church is coming back with him. And know this, he can't come back with him unless he's already took it at some previous time to him. And he's going to take. So I had a buddy here a while back say, if anybody could show him the rapture in the Bible, he'd eat his hat. I started carrying him a box of salt, and I said, no, he's reading the same Bible I'm reading. If you don't want to go, you don't have to.
That's right.
But I'm going because he said I could. The rapture, there is no prophecy that just says, okay, you see this happen, and the rapture's going to occur. No. Now, the prophecy is all about the second coming to rule and reign. But when you understand, when you see these prophecies fulfilling of his second coming, knowing that the rapture is going to be 7 years before that happens, we understand that we're a lot closer than what most folks think. The Spirit of God, look, Noah was not a cowboy. And when those animals went on the ark, Noah wasn't out there driving them in the ark.
No.
The Spirit of God at that time said, get on the ark, and they lined up and went on the ark. And it'll be the same way, folks, when the rapture occurs. The Spirit of God that is in you, if you're born again, will let you know it's time, and you'll be ready for the rapture. But we need to stay ready every day, because, hey, our time here on earth could end today. So we need to be ready to, at all times, to meet the Savior. But now, we know God is not in timing, but the timing is put in the Bible so that man can kind of get a grasp on things. Yes. God's in eternity. He moves through eternity as easy as we move from one day to another. But in 2 Peter 3:8, it tells us a little of God's timing, although he's not in time. This is for us where it says that 1,000 years is as a day, and a day is 1,000 years with God. In other words, 1,000 years in our timing, God looks at it like it's a day, it's a passing time. But now, understanding that, look over at Hosea. Maybe I'm saying that right, Hosea. I don't think he was Mexican, but Hosea. I think it's a chapter 6. If I can find it here in this Bible. It was in there when I left home. Chapter 6. Now here's what the prophets wrote. We'll start over in chapter 5. Mine 5 and 6 is just flipped across from page to page. We've read this several times. I don't know if everybody that's here tonight was here when we was looking at this, but we've read it several times over the years. It's the Lord speaking to Israel here. And in 5 and 15, look what it's. This is pretty plain. I will go and return unto my place, until they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. In their affliction, they will seek me early. And Jesus did exactly that. He went and returned unto his place because Israel would not have him. But now see, when this was wrote, it wasn't chapter and verse. It was on a scroll all together, so you'd just read it together. It said, come and let us return unto the Lord, for he has torn, and he will heal us. He has smitten, and he will bind us up. Now you see that L-O-R-D, return unto the L-O-R-D, that's the harvest part of God. They said, let's get right with God. Because he's the harvesters did all this, but he'll heal us up. He said, after 2 days will he revive us. And again, we look at that as 1,000 years is a day. That's pretty plain. After 2 days, he will revive us, and in the third day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Then shall we know if we follow on to know the Lord. His going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain unto the earth. He said after 2 days, he's going to revive. And he's talking to the people of Israel at that time. How many knows we're grafted in now to the promises of Israel? And so the prophecies, when you see of Israel, are mostly dual prophecies. But he said he's going to come back in the third day and raise us up. And folks, we're in that third day. And we see that same pattern in the crucifixion, where Christ was in the grave 2 days and back on the third. Folks, the minute he died on that cross, your sins and my sin was paid for. He could have stepped off that cross at that moment, and salvation would have still been complete. But he's always following God's plan. He's always following God's type and God's pattern. And so he was gone 2 days and was back the third. According to God's timing, he's been gone 2 days now, but he's coming back in the third. And we're, folks, regardless of how you figure it, we're there. We're in the third day. And so the rapture of the church could be at any time. Like I said the other day, the church may not ever see another Thanksgiving period, another Christmas period. And I'm not setting dates. I'm saying we're in that timing. Could happen. Could happen. Best thing we can do is get ready and stay ready. Hebrews tells us, Hebrews 10 and 25, I believe it is, not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together, and much the more so as we see the day, talking about the day of Christ, as we see that day approaching. Well, folks, how could we see that day approaching unless it's in this word? It's in here, folks, just like it was in there when Christ was born in Bethlehem. But men didn't want to see it, and they don't want to see it now. We live like, hey, this thing's going to go on forever, but it's not, folks. It's running out quickly. And we're seeing the staging being set for the Antichrist to take over. So again today and I didn't see it on the news. I just saw somebody had put a note there on Facebook that a mob was stopping traffic in Hoover. They were. See, blocking traffic. See, that's another one of those things where law doesn't mean anything anymore. Lawlessness, which is a sign of the coming Antichrist. Lawlessness gets to where there is no respect for the rule of law. And I'm going to tell you again, America is not in the end time prophecies as a ruling nation. She's not there. So you figure it out. The only way that she cannot be there is that we're conquered from the outside, or we fall from the inside. And if you look at what's happening, folks, we're falling from the inside. When the judges can tell you not to tell your little boy that he's a boy because he's just 6 years old, you have to wait till he decides. And when folks, Jesus is taken out of everything and the devil's put in, know that this nation is crumbling. It's dying. It's dying. And Jesus said it would, as it would be his coming would be as it was in the days of Noah and the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. And if you look at those times, and like I said, but we'd get back and look at that one day, and we hadn't done it yet. But in the days of Noah, they were aborting their babies. Yeah. It was the shedding of innocent blood that caused the flood, folks. We've already killed, what, 6 million? 60 million. 60 million killed babies in the womb. It's the innocent blood. And we're back in that time. And Sodom and Gomorrah was totally immoral in everything. You don't think we're back there yet? We're back there. Billy Graham said several years ago, he said, if the Lord doesn't soon judge America, he'll have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. But what Billy was overlooking was that there's more than 10 righteous left in America. But the minute the church is gone, tribulation will fall. And we're seeing it building up right now. And I'm going to tell you what, church membership doesn't make you the church. Born again makes you the church. There's a lot of church memberships, out there that the people, again, they don't have a clue about what's going on and don't care. Sometimes you can talk to people who would just tell you up front that they're sinners. You can talk more to them about Jesus and about the Word than you can folks that says, some people that says I'm Christian. Because if you start talking to them, they'll start telling you what they believe. And that's where we've come to. It's more about what I think and what I believe than what thus says the Word of God. Folks, what I think and what God doesn't honor what I think and what I believe. He honors what He said. See, it's not faith for me to believe something just because I decide to believe it. It's faith to believe what He said. It's true. That's God faith. And we just add faith to everything. Ooh, I'm of the Baptist faith. I'm of the Methodist faith. I'm of the Holiness faith. No, there ain't but one faith, and that's the faith in Jesus Christ. And if you don't have faith in Him, you don't have faith. You just have a belief. See, you've just decided to believe something. It's faith in Him. That's true faith, the biblical faith. And that's the only thing that He really honors is His own Word. Hey, if God gave us the Word and didn't honor it, you could never trust Him. It's His Word that He honors. It's His Word. And as He gave these prophecies and He said, this is what's going to happen and then I'm coming back, you can bet He's coming back just exactly according to those prophecies, just like He did the first time. See, Daniel gave them a starting period, and the wise men knew that there was supposed to be a star arise, and they went into Bethlehem. And we see these postcards, and let me just throw this in. We see these Christmas postcards with 3 wise men. No, if they'd come across that trade route, just 3 of them, they wouldn't have been wise, they'd have been robbed. There was a caravan of them. Enough when they got into Jerusalem, all Jerusalem was all upset. You know, it caused a stir there because here comes a caravan from the east, and they're bringing all kind of goodies to a king. And again, and we know this. Usually, I teach the whole story every year about this time, but they didn't find Jesus in Bethlehem. If you'll read that story, Jesus didn't stay in that stall until He was grown. They moved Him into a house. He went up into Jerusalem for circumcisions on the 8th day. They found Him in the house, and the star. You know, you see that always going before the wise men. No, the wise men were tickled. The star went out. It pointed them that way. But when they came out from inquiring where Christ was supposed to be born, they said the star that appeared to them in the east was back in the sky. And they were overjoyed to see it back. And it took them to where Jesus was. But by that time, Jesus was almost 2 years old, or 2 years old. Remember when Herod killed all the babies? 2 and under? He knew about the time. He was trying to kill Jesus. And that, you know, and he knew if we get them all in this time period. And a lot of the skeptics say that didn't happen. You know, none of the historians wrote about babies being killed in Bethlehem. Well, how many stories have you saw today about how many babies was killed today in the abortion mills? Did you see any of that on the news today? You know why? Killing babies was not a news story. No. Not then and not now. But you can bet Herod sent folks into Bethlehem to kill those babies trying to stop king. Herod killed his own son because he was afraid he'd take over. So he was not a nice man. But again, that was the devil trying to do what he could not do then. He could not stop the Messiah then. He can't stop him from coming now. David asked the question, why does the heathen rage? All the anger and the madness against God and against His right to rule means nothing to God. His word He's still going to fulfill His word. All this rebellion is not stopping one thing, folks. We don't have to believe it. We don't have to teach it. We don't have to live it. It ain't going to stop it. It's still going to happen, just like He said. And we see in Revelation 13 the coming of an end-time global government. And we really begin to hear about it under the president that we just buried. Remember when George Bush talked about we had to move into a new world order and all these points of light? He really pushed the one world order. Well, it's going to be a one world disorder because man can't do it, folks. But it's coming down. We've got the UN, which is the gathering together of nations. We've got a World Bank, and the UN. They put sanctions against nations that don't do what they say. And I saw today where they're going to pass a document that declares migration as a human right. In other words, you have no right to stop folks from migrating into your country regardless. It's up to them, not you. They're passing, trying to pass this thing that makes migration a human right. And if you look about the Antichrist, the prophet wrote about the Antichrist, and he said, I will remove the boundaries or the borders of the people and rob their treasures. And this is exactly what's happening, folks. Europe is already gone. Yes. Europe is already overrun by Islamic people. It's already gone. No nation can stand sovereign if it doesn't have borders, if it doesn't have laws. And we're not a nation of laws anymore. It's according to who you are. You go out here and do something, and the law might come on you. But if you're influential, some judge is going to turn you loose. Yeah, England's gone, and Europe's gone. But what I tell you about there in Isaiah 10. But there's part I saw the other day where this Islamic Amman was talking about Michigan already belonged to them. Minnesota. No, it's Michigan. So it already belonged to the Islam, and that they were going to take over America, and they're doing it, folks. They're doing it. When you do away with Jesus and embrace a satanic God, what can you expect? Hey, the Bible said, "Don't let no man be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever thing a man soweth, that shall he also reap." And America has sowed the seed of rebellion, and we're seeing it. But it was the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 10. If you want to read that, what I was quoting a while ago, he said, talking about the spirit about the Antichrist. He said, "I have removed the boundaries or the borders of the people, and have robbed their treasures." In other words, Isaiah 10 and 13 through 15. So the spirit of Antichrist is to remove all national borders and make it a global community, which will come under one ruler. And I'm going to tell you, folks, he's alive and well right now. Do I know who he is? No, and I don't want to know who he is. I want to be out of here when the world knows who he is. I know who Jesus is. I can tell you about Jesus. But the Bible's got the Antichrist kind of laid out too. You want to get down and study the prophecies on the Antichrist. He will have a Jewish background. I can prove that to you. But when he gets in there and comes into full power, he will set out to kill every Jew, because the Jew stands between him and Satan's agenda, because to the Jews came the promises of God. Right. All the prophecies come through that little nation. And if the devil could destroy every Jew, he could effectively stop the prophecies. Of course, he can't. He's been trying to do that for years and can't. The Bible says, though, that those that sleep in the night, meaning those that can't see this coming, has rejected the revelation of God. And Jesus one time, when we always talk about what the prophecies say and how people are overlooking them and ignoring them, you know, the Pharisees came to Jesus one time and he talked about them looking at the sky and telling when it was going to rain and when it's going to be clear. Remember that? And Jesus said, "You hypocrites, how can you discern the face of the sky and you don't know this time?" He said, "You're looking around you at the natural time, the natural things, but you can't see what's happening right around you." They thought Jesus was the prince of the devil. He said, "You can tell when it's going to rain and when the storm's coming, but you can't see what time you're in." Folks, we must see what time we're in, because the world ain't going to see it unless somebody tells them. And that is our job, is to sound the alarm in Zion, to tell folks that, that Christ is soon coming. But, again, to be ready, because he's going to come whether we're ready or not. The rapture's going to occur whether we're ready or not. The church is going to be ready. Make sure you're there. Make sure you're part of that. But we cannot stop. We cannot stop his timing, and the devil can't stop his timing. But I saw today, did y'all see this, where the Nikki Haley had brought it up in the UN, trying to get them to condemn Hamas from shooting those rockets over into Israel. But the Arab League said Hamas had a right to defend itself. They've been shooting at civilians in Israel now for weeks. They had a right to defend itself. That was the one started it. Well, Israel gave them Gaza Strip back, which was Israel's to start with, and they've been lobbing rockets over there ever since. But the UN has condemned Israel. Again, that shows you that spirit. They've condemned Israel more than they've condemned any other nation, more than they've ever condemned the Islamic folks for killing them, killing the Jews and causing the terrorism. But like I say, she brought it up on behalf of America to condemn Hamas for shooting all those rockets over into the civilian areas. And the Arab League said, hey, they have a right to defend themselves. And you know what? Your tax, this will make you happy, your tax dollar is still being sent to a lot of those Arab nations that is trying to destroy Israel.
That's right.
My tax dollars and your tax dollars is really supporting terrorism. That shows you how nuts we get. Sin will make you stupid, folks. It will, and then it'll kill you. And it's killing this nation. But just as it was in 2,000 years ago, Jesus came to Bethlehem right on time. He's coming back right on time, ready or not. And the timing is drawing closer all of the time. And just because we decided not to get in the book and not to study the prophecies and not seek understanding and wisdom will not deter him, and it'll just leave us not ready, leave us surprised. But you know, I asked folks, well, if you don't believe that we're in that time, where do you see this ending? I mean, where do you see the world headed to? If you don't believe Christ is going to come and put an end to all this, where do you see it heading to? We've got enough weapons now to destroy the earth, 7 or 8 times over. And we're constantly building biological weapons, and the morality of man is out the window. There's no such thing as morality much anymore. But so where do you see it heading if you don't believe that Christ is coming? Do you think man's going to finally just get better and better and better and stop all the crime? It's just like I saw a piece yesterday, I believe it was, where this guy said, all we've got to do is pass legislation that tells the communities it's against the law for them to have guns, and Americans will just bring their guns and give them to us. And some black guy answered right under there, no, I'll just keep my gun, thank you. I'm not going to put my safety in the hands of idiots. And, but see, that whole thing, why the disarming of America is not anything about stopping the shootings. It's about control, folks. It's about control. You cannot control an armed population. That's the reason our forefathers gave us the right to be armed and not to be infringed. That right should not be infringed upon. But it's been, and I saw yesterday where they passed a law in the House that the members of Congress could no longer bring weapons into the Congress. And you know what that is they're trying to show a good example. But they got snipers on the roof there. They got Capitol Police everywhere. They still got armed guards. You don't have armed guards except the angels of God. That's all you got. But that's enough. But I'm talking about, hey, if you call the law right now because you had an armed intruder trying to break in, how long do you think it would take him to get here?
An hour.
How long do you think it would take to pull a trigger? Most of the mass shootings would have never happened if somebody had been in there with a weapon to shoot back.